Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and today we are talking about the path of personal growth. You can see the little path right there, going from burnout into that life of fulfillment when you're feeling aligned in your relationships, in your work, in your health. How do we get there? And how do we start to recalibrate some of our expectations around this so that you can go on this journey as fruitfully as possible and discover your passion and your purpose on the other side? So today's agenda and objectives, we're going to discuss the phases of transformation. We have discussed this before on the podcast. I don't remember what episode it was, but we will be reviewing it because what I've remembered or learned in this life is more often than not, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught things because we don't always get it the first time through. And when we revisit things, you can understand it through a new lens. And that's some of the more beautiful, that's where the great nuggets of wisdom come from. We're going to then go on to debunk some common myths about what growth looks like and what it really is. We're going to discuss a little bit about self-actualization, that journey, and Maslow's hierarchy. So I've been playing around with some of those concepts, talked about it on our last episode as well. So again, bringing it back up. We're talking about practical strategies for navigating the peaks and valleys of life. Ooh, all kinds of fun things. Before we get going into it, let's go with some words for thought. Everyone wants to live on top of the mountain, but all the happiness and growth occurs while you're climbing it. Mountain's going to be the analogy of the day. You're going to see it in a bit. That's from Andy Rooney, by the way. And I think what's important here, one of the things I reflect on often is that everybody's trying to rush through life, forgetting that you only get one of these experiences this way. Wouldn't you want to cherish it along the way? And I think part of the deeper objectives here today is to give you some strategies so you can maybe fall in love with this process of your personal growth journey. Because what I've noticed is when you feel aimless and you feel left without tools or not knowing how to use the tools, you engage in meaningless suffering. And there's an interesting acceptance. Once we accept that there will be discomfort along this path, when we feel like it has purpose, then it is not so unbearable. You actually might even enjoy a bit of that process as well. So let's first discuss the phases of transformation. Again, this is a recap. My little phrase, happiness starts at home, is my way of reminding myself of the 4 phases. HOME is the acronym for the 4 phases of transformation. And I also believe fundamentally that home within you, because wherever you are is where your home is, it starts there. If you try to build it outside of yourself, promise you, it's not a super stable foundation there. So let's do this. It starts off with honesty. Got to look in the mirror. And if you can think of this more as an assessment phase, reflecting on what's actually in front of you. When I do this, it's about looking at your time and your energy and how does that align with your core values and your objectives or where you want to go. Usually there's oh my God, I can't do something right now. And I don't feel good about it. Whether it's in your health, where that could be looking at the scale or looking in the mirror, your clothes don't fit, or you're out of breath walking up the stairs. That could be a health red flag. If it's in your relationships, maybe you're not feeling valued, maybe you're feeling disconnected. You're going to note that we're going to talk a little bit more about the burnout symptoms. We talked about that last time as well. The spiritual burnout would be a better way of calling it because we're talking more about existential stuff here. Maybe these relationships you're not feeling just grounded. Maybe you're not feeling stable. Maybe you're feeling that it's not going to work out. And then in your business, maybe you've lost your passion. Maybe you feel unmotivated. Maybe you feel like, what's the point? Maybe there's a lot of friction with your staff or your clients, or you've fallen out of love with the work altogether. It seems pointless. You got to be honest with yourself, and you have to take a clear look and see what's in front of you, because if you don't, you're going to start throwing darts at a board, and you might hit something, maybe, but chances are you're going to miss the target. That's or you look at your bank account. Those things drive you into action, but you're going to have to first learn how to face that discomfort. It doesn't mean you're bad. It means you understand what's going on so you can make an informed decision going forward. And for the record, a lot of people, and I am somebody included in that struggle, I at least struggle initially with sitting still. That's what this requires, being still long enough to look at the information. It's not as exciting to do this phase, but for somebody who's very much inspired by getting into action and movement and busyness, this is the skill you really need to learn. It's in that silence and that quiet. That's a metaphorical sense as well. That's where you're going to see some of your greatest growth. And it seems really weird that doing quote unquote nothing will lead to your greatest growth. Hence meditation and all those kinds of things. Anyway, we're going to move on from it. Once you've assessed it, then you can organize things. This is about organizing your lifestyle, the elements of your life. We talked about this last time about the nexus of happiness. Your schedule is the beautiful reflection of where your priorities and your attention is going. Where your attention goes is where energy flows. If you are not intentional about this, your energy is going to get sprayed all over the place. And more often than not, it's going to be those energy vampires, the people that are not valuing you, or the activities that are not creating meaningful results, that you're going to pour your energy into those distractions because they're easy, they're quick fixes, but they're just band-aids. Getting clear about organizing your priorities. So self-care would be your health practices, your quality connections are your meaningful, or your relationships, and then your meaningful work is the tasks that are going to move you towards your purpose and creating that greater sense of success. And remember that purple ring around the whole thing, that is your complete sense of self. This needs to fit within the paradigm of you. That is your life. Remember, I mentioned last time, there's no such thing as a work-life balance. There is life, and there's the things that you've got to account for within that life, and it needs to fit appropriately. That's where I was talking about before. That container needs to be appropriately managed, time management on your schedule with the things that matter most. Otherwise, those things are not going to be addressed. Okay? From there, then you can step into maturation, responsible growth. Think of mature. A mature person is steady, tactful, deliberate, consistent. Transformation doesn't happen without that. That's why I'm talking about this. Responsible growth, where you learn how to build mastery and skills and being consistent and building a solid foundation. Because once you have a solid foundation and a skill set, you could becoming a master ultimately is knowing how to take a tool that you've learned and then applying it in multiple different contexts. That is what we want here. It takes time and effort and consistency and repetition to develop that. If you try to sprint through that process without, for the sake of getting through it as opposed to understanding it, you're going to miss out on that skill set and your foundation, especially if you're growing to something new. You're not going to be able to sustain that. That's a house of cards you're building. Which then leads us to the endurance phase. When we get to the top, how do we keep this sustainability? How do we keep it going? This is much of what we're going to talk about today, ironically. And this is the hard part that people don't actually think about. Most people can think a little bit about the first things, but most people don't think about this. How do we keep it going and prevent ourselves from destroying ourselves? And if you're watching this and you've been tuning in for a while, perhaps you picked up on this. You've probably yourself, if you are somebody what I would consider an impact-driven leader, whether you're an entrepreneur, an executive, somebody who wants to leave a meaningful legacy, you've probably banged your head against the wall a few times and you've burned yourself out, whether it's feeling the physical ramifications that I mentioned before, or the stresses in your relationships, or the malaise and the burnout at work. Those things are all signs and symptoms. of you burning yourself out and not having built a system and not finding ways for you to be able to sustain the success that you will incur along the growth journey. So again, we're going to spend a little more time within these elements today so we can see this more of a cycle and a process as opposed to just a straight line. So let's start there. Let's start by dispelling some growth myths. Growth myths. That was a tongue twister. Here's what most people think growth looks like. Linear, constant improvement. Whee! I started doing some work and I got better. Especially if you're a novice, when you're first out the gate. I'm going to use a term from my fitness background here. We call it beginner gains. When you're first starting out, you'll get somebody, it's usually the guys especially, get under a barbell. I'm going to use squats as the example. They'll start lifting and they hit new personal records almost like weekly or monthly. And within their first, 3-4 months, I've watched people put on 40, 50, 60, 80 pounds to their squat. And you see this look in their eyes, especially if they're working out next to somebody else. And they're like, if I just keep going like this for the next 4 months, I'm going to be as strong as this. Anybody who's been in the game long enough knows that's just not how this goes. You do not consistently just see the number keep going up. And ironically, to be a master of anything at the end, you start to recognize you put a lot of work in to get seemingly very minimal improvement. Though that, as we're going to talk about here today, the growth we're going to look at is going to be much different. So this is the beginner, the newbie, fresh out the gate that has not gotten punched in the face yet. Go figure, when we jump from, and this is especially for anybody who struggles putting a lot on their plate and uses distractions as their means to cope with their feelings of inner angst and lack of fulfillment and lack of purpose. They just go add some new project or some other thing. And while on the surface it might look like, oh, I'm doing something fun, they're avoiding it because they want to feel that quick hit of dopamine. Oh, I made some quick improvement. Oh, I wanted to play this game. Whatever. It's a lot with video games and gambling and all that kind of stuff. Feeling like you're making quick gains, but it might not be true. More often than not, it's not true, especially if you're going towards something that has depth and substance behind it, which if you're listening to this point is probably what you're seeking. You want depth. You want this spiritual growth that we've been bringing up a lot lately. So this is what it really looks like. It's nonlinear and there's fluctuations. And the other weird part is not all growth is visible. We're going to cover that a little bit more in depth later on. And you can see here, the stock market is a beautiful example of this. What is it? The S&P 500, I think year over year, since its inception, I think it's grown on average between 9 and 10% or something along those lines, or 8 and 10%. There's been crashes along the way. That's including the housing market crash in 2008, earlier up. Like, there's been numerous crashes along the way. But if you actually look at it, you zoom out and you see the bigger picture, which this is a great indicator for anybody who freaks out when you get caught up in the distractions that the news does. Everybody starts freaking out because there's just this moment in time where it's going down a little bit. I'm not going to go down those lines too much right now, but the whole idea is if you zoom out, you'll see getting in even during a downturn starting today is always better than starting 5 years from now, because you're going to continue to grow. That's very difficult to deal with because of feelings and emotions. You can see that trend there. The arrow is still above even after that dip. And when you look back on your life, I have one client recently, we had a chat and he was talking about his weight from before our conversation. He had been tracking his weight from the previous year. And there was this 1 or 2 months where he was like, look at this whole trend here, but this 1 month, it went back up 1 or 2 months. And I was like, well, what was actually going on during that time? I was like, oh, you know what? I never associated what was actually happening in my life. He's like, my mom was having some stuff going on in her life, and I was supporting her through that. Huh. Well, that doesn't mean he wasn't growing. Didn't mean that he was failing. He was supporting and strengthening the other systems around him, and he didn't go all the way back to his previous weight. So it's still growth. Most people can't zoom out far enough and think about the sustaining of their growth as being part of the winning process. That visible piece of him strengthening a relationship or developing a stronger support system around him, while it didn't show up on the one metric that he was tracking, that was actually what was going to enable him later on to continue his growth in the future. So that's some of the invisible stuff that if you only look at one number, it doesn't tell the full story. You can make numbers tell whatever story you want, but if you can zoom out and you want to get better perspective, that's important to do. So let's get into what it feels like. It feels like you just start spinning your wheels. Oh my God, I just keep going and going and going. And growth is actually cyclical. The same thing came back up. Oh my God, I got in another fight with my wife or with my husband, especially with many of the couples I've coached. And because it's a collaborative journey. There's one that comes to mind right now with their business that they owned. They had been going on this great stretch. They'd been previously really stressed out together as they were building their wellness center. And they had a lot of friction. And then there was this 1 or 2 months where the things were great. Everything was looking up. And then they got in a fight again on our next call. Oh my God, it feels like we're back at square one. Not realizing they were having a fight every 2 weeks or every week. Now it was a couple months. That's the thing that people forget. It feels like, oh my God, the same thing happened once again. Well, you know what? Those are weak points, and that's not a bad thing. What this will lead to is understanding that this is what growth actually is. You just had to zoom and shift the perspective of what that cycle looks like. We're cycling up, and they're evolutions of the same thing and testing the strengths of the system. Chances are, let's use my example in my house. My wife always gets upset with me when the house is not clean. Till the end of time, I know that that's going to be the fail point. I'm aware of it because that's just her thing. It's her most sensitive piece. Now, I like the house clean as well, but my threshold for what is proper and organized is very different than hers. So if she's feeling a certain kind of way and I've been distracted with something else, it's probably where the fail point's going to be. The difference here is success looks different. So instead, just like I used that example with the other couple fighting before about the same thing, I'll use my wife and I instead. For us, it might be, wow, we went 3 months before we got into the same argument about the dishes. Or growth might be how quickly we went through the growth or the conflict. Or it might be how we navigated it. It might have been smoother in our conversation. It might have been more gentle in our words. It might have been more amicable. We might have found a new solution. That's what is different when these things happen, because you might be in a different place. What if you move into a bigger home? You have more things to be responsible for. What if you have other family members that you have to account for? You have kids. You're going to bring new variables into your life, and certain things will always stress people differently. But if you can see this as an evolution and a growth as we're spiraling up, as opposed to where we just think, oh my God, I'm spiraling in the same spot, you can start to zoom out and be, oh, this is the same thing, but it's okay. We've actually grown. How can I grow through this differently? How can I appreciate this lesson coming back up? As I had mentioned it before, that's what we were talking about. We more often than not need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. It's the same thing from a slightly different lens. This is how mastery happens, because you learn how to develop the skill in lots of different elements. And Ty, of course, in the background is really wanting my attention. Hey, Ty, come here, buddy. Come talk to your friends. He's been a piece of work lately. So I want you to think about this from the self-actualization stuff. We talked about Maslow's hierarchy last week. This is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a personal development scale, and for the record, it was created in a fashion to visualize some of these concepts he's talking about. It's obviously what we're going through here is showing that this is not exactly how it just happens. I'm going to show you even more some evolutions that I've thought about on how this works out, because it's not just some straight line up the pyramid. Go figure, just like we talked about. This is a deep reflection I had the other day. I said, well, we're looking at it from the wrong lens. Think about this as a pyramid, but what if we thought about it as a mountain that we're climbing? And you see that spiral? Ooh, we're going up and around the mountain, and we're finding the path that works best for us as we climb. And we have to see the next leg of the journey, the next, if there's a next boulder or next maneuver that we needed to climb, we need to see it from different angles. So as you see that spiraling, think as if we're facing the mountain right now, and that spiral over here. Well, on the backside of that mountain, we don't see that growth. That might be where you're shoring up things at home with your relationships. That might be where you're shoring things up at work, or you're making more money, or whatever. And I'm coming back and saying, like, maybe the metric you were using was the number on your scale as what you thought progress was, but that, or the deeper stuff was maybe you were developing a better relationship with yourself. That's the invisible stuff, because you're going to need to confront the inner stuff, that spiritual weight loss along this journey, because the higher you climb, the less shit you can carry. That's just the way it goes. You're going to be exhausted from carrying an extra 50 pounds of the burden up the mountain. So that internal weight that you've been carrying, the guilt, the shame, we always talk about the generational trauma, things of that nature, the things you've been inherited from the past, or the wounds of your growth path. We need to address those things. And that's the invisible work that might be happening. And it's not showing up on the scale. It's not showing up in the one number you're looking at. So that's important for you to address that within yourself. Look at it not just from this two-dimensional object, this two-dimensional path. We have to see the mountain. We have to see the path from a lot of different angles before we make our ascent. And this is where, when you talk about the imposter syndrome, I know a lot of people, especially if you're a high performer, and especially if you have like values within yourself, that imposter syndrome is something that plagues many. And instead of looking at it as this demon, as this darkness, as this I'm a bad person thing, I challenge you to look at it as a great thing. Let's use this as a sense of you want to be appropriately prepared for the next leg of the journey. I think that's a great sign of your moral compass, that you care enough to have integrity with the next level of responsibility you're about to take on. And in preparing for that, you're going to do a better job. There is no perfect setup. You're never going to be perfectly ready, but it's the intention about doing your best to prepare for the role. I always say, be it before you become it. That's the training. That's the training to be able to absorb the new stresses and responsibilities. And you can look at it as, again, if I was going to climb a mountain, I probably want to have the appropriate gear, not too much, not too little. I want to know how to use those tools in a lot of different scenarios. And you're assessing that. So knowing where you're at on this journey and understanding what you're struggling with is important. For the record here, I mostly work with people that are dealing with this higher level, the self-actualization stuff. And as a quick reminder, this here is Maslow's original five-tiered, 5 levels of the hierarchy, or stages of development. There was later on, self-actualization was broken down into cognitive, aesthetic, self-actualization, transcendence. Cognitive is about accumulating knowledge. So what did we just talk about? You're going to want to know what information you're going to need. Aesthetic is about refining and beautifying. So let's think about the refining aspect. You want to be effective, but you also want to be efficient. So the effective is I have the right information. Efficient is I can do it quickly. You don't want to be burdened by excess weight or excess information or excess whatever. So you refine. And then self-actualization is, okay, here's the purest form. I know what to do. I know this. I know the role. I know who I am. And then transcend it. You're going to see that's about legacy and purpose. Some evolutions here within this, as we're going to see the phases, how it's not always just one leg of self-actualization, or at least this thing broken down in a second. So I want you to think about it as the mountain. All right, as you can see, a kind of butchered, layering numerous mountain peaks here. If we can think of it as one step of the mountain, bear with me, that'll help. But you can see over here, I think of as we're climbing to our highest purpose, I would go so far as to say that's the when we die, what will our legacy truly be? These other little mountains here is the other journeys we go through life. Think about the first mountain. We've already talked about the survival needs, so it's worthy of making sure that's addressed. It's those survival, physiological safety needs. Then you have your belongingness and loving needs, and your esteem needs. So it's kind of like your network. After that is the be all you can be element that we're addressing here. And let's just say one of them is the first time you got your dream job or whatever you thought it was. You climbed that peak here, you learned the skills, you got your system down, you know exactly who you are, what you are in that role, and then you can teach it to other people. That's transcending. I'm passing down the lessons. But then maybe you got to a point where you're burnt out with that. There's that transcendence element. You've gone as far as you can go. Some people push this way past their limit and are not willing to listen to that. Some people just numb out and just think about your teacher, that one teacher who just got to that position and then just checked out. Oof, that's brutal. Or in a relationship, I've seen all those things. And some people numb out on things like crazy activities, booze, alcohol, and they'll actually fall back down the mountain and they'll go dead broke or whatever it is. They'll have to climb back into those lower areas. So it's important to be noting when you've climbed into this. You want to be paying attention to those signs and symptoms. We're not perfect. The first time through it, you don't know. You don't know that's what's coming. So you probably banged your head against the wall and perhaps had a little tumble and it was painful. Maybe it came from got blindsided by a breakup or something like that, or your business failed, or you put on a bunch of weight. Whatever the thing was, you couldn't handle the next piece. You couldn't confront the fact that you're not fully fulfilled in that role. That's okay. Who is it? Gary Vee all the time talks about people like the 20-year-olds right now think you have to have it all figured out by the time you're 30. That's insane. That's insane. What kind of pressure you're putting yourself, not allowing yourself to evolve and grow into different elements into your life. You don't know everything about yourself because you haven't done everything yet. So the key here is being honest. The courage to be honest with yourself and say, I'm not fully happy. What needs to change? That courage is humility. Yes, you're going to take a little valley, but let's look here. If we look down here, you're going to take a small step back. That's okay. Maybe you're going to do a career change. That's okay. Maybe you found out that that's not your thing that makes you the happiest. That's all right. You're going to take a pay cut. You're going to take a couple of years off. You're going to do a sabbatical. You're going to do a gap year. However you're going to describe it. Maybe you had a divorce. I don't know. But it's the humility to take that step back, to go back to a base level. And you can see in that esteem, what do I care about? What are the relationships I'm bringing into play here? It's going to feel bad. It's going to feel like you're losing. It's going to feel like you're failing. Let's note, there's a difference between this spot right here, a little dip, versus the bottom, death. That is an important thing to note. One of the ironic things in my job all the time is reminding people, hey, by the way, you're still here. You're still awesome. You're just pivoting. It's not a bad thing. That's okay. When you can give yourself permission to do that and you realize many people have done that, you're going to have a lot more fun. When you can do that, then you give yourself permission to recalibrate your life because you actually have the information from being honest. I'm not happy. Maybe I'm not happy with my health. Maybe I'm not happy with my relationships. Maybe I'm not happy with my work. Cool. You're going to then recalibrate your system. You're going to reorganize. You're going to go back. You're going to take your values. You're going to align them. What do I want my relationships to look like? What do I want my health to look like? What does the habits look like? That's the process of removal. You're taking things away. It's a different lens of the aesthetic. You're removing. This is the micro piece of this cognitive thing. You're continually accumulating information. You're refining the information you have constantly. Your capacity to support the next level grows. Your wisdom, your knowledge base grows, but it's more honed and you know exactly where you want to be applying it. The environments you want to be in are more honed. Guess what? You're going to take another pivot. You're going to climb. You're going to do the thing, right? So you've recalibrated your health, your relationships, your work. You're going to try it again. Awesome. You're going to climb. Same thing happens. You get to the top. Maybe you're going to notice the signs of burnout a little bit sooner. I'm feeling it coming up. I noticed it again. Cool. Awesome. Maybe you're going to notice it and be a little quicker to action. Maybe you need to take a little deeper tumble, but you're resilient enough that little tumble, okay, you'll figure it out. And you just do it over and over again. And notice we just dropped that honesty, organization, and maturation phase over and over and over again. The endurance element of all this is about getting back to honesty. How quickly can you get to a place and then say, I'm going to assess, we'll see. And then give yourself permission to not lock yourself into that identity. You're assuming a role. Your identity, this is why I've brought up the importance of defining your core values. Your core values are your identity. Those transcend, ironically, any role you fulfill. It goes if you're a parent. It goes if you're a grandparent. It goes if you're an employee. It goes if you're a boss. It goes if you're a business owner. It goes if you're married or divorced, single, whatever you want to call it, widower. Any of the values is how you show up. And that will make it easier for you to tap into that humility to take whatever step back and pivot in your life. That is what we want. That's the endurance element. Your endurance gets better the more you do this stuff. The more you practice this cycle, your actual ability to go through the honesty and organization and maturation and the willingness to come back to it quickly, it's how quickly you can continue to cycle reps without a ton of rest, because you build rest in along the way. You build in your honesty. The more you're willing, the more often you're willing to confront things honestly along the journey and track things and be aware of things. The awareness, hence Naked Sunday, was just sitting with myself and becoming aware consistently. The more quickly you can pivot and the smaller the falls when they happen. And they're going to happen. They're just going to be different. That's the acceptance that this discomfort is part of this journey. Right, Ty? Yeah, you growl from the background. You let us know. You'll notice, and we don't know how many times this will happen, but the best part is you're going to get more clear every time you do this. Notice each one of these valleys is much higher than the previous. You have continued to grow. And if we zoomed out, say this was 20 years here, and we zoomed out to a 40-year timeline, that would look like a little blip. It'd look almost like nothing happened because we had enough time to look at the thing, and it would be relatively linear on the grand scale. It would be a blip in time in the cosmic universe. So what helps? Well, I just used the word before, zooming out. Let's first take a look at what's the environment you're in. This is a fun story. A buddy of mine, Jack, has been a client of mine for years. One of my, especially early on, he's been went from my first gym to my second gym and made it the whole way through. One of my greatest weight loss stories. And we're still great friends and we continue to work together. We were just talking a couple weeks ago about his current health stuff. And he went back to another gym, like a Globo gym. He's in a different area right now. And he was looking around as he was making his new climb out of his current physical stuff. He got hurt and he's on his way back. He's reassessing right now he was able to reassess what's going on, his capacity. His locked in his garage working out at that moment, he was only comparing himself to his former self, not able to, and he was thinking his peak fitness time. Again, coming off some injuries, some other things coming on. He was only able to see the peak version of him. That shift in his environment put himself into another place where there was people of all ability levels. He looked around and was like, oh my God, I know way more. I am so much farther ahead. Just because he had a shift in perspective. He could visually see how far he'd come. His ability to squat, his ability to do certain movements cleanly. And he appreciated his own technique. I could have coached most of the people in here, which is so cool. Sometimes you're standing a foot away from the wall. All you need to do is take 3 steps to the right and you'll say, there's not a wall there anymore. I can actually see how close I am to my goals. It's hard to see that. Or we turn around and be like, oh, that's how far I've come? I was only looking in one direction. I feel stuck right now. It's hard to do that. That's why zooming out is important and look at the environment. Change your environment for a day. Just put yourself where you're around novices. And what's great about that, like think of martial arts. Black belts, often black belts go teach the white belts. That's a really powerful exercise in reminding yourself, wow, this is where it starts. This is how we hone this along the way. You get a whole new perspective when you got to teach what you once were and how oblivious you once were to things. Holy smokes, man, I really have learned a lot. That's pretty cool. And you can also feel like you're giving. That's really fun. Then we want to think about who's supporting you. You got to remember, the people around you are the mirror of your values and your priorities. If you're not where you want to go and you're feeling stuck, it's time to find some mentors or bring in a new person, a new energy that aligns with your values, but is also where you want to go. Because then they can give you perspective on how far you've come. That's part of why he and I were talking. Hey man, got to zoom out just a little bit. Tell me what's going on. And you can see that. Cool. And they can share their stories. So you go, oh, this sounds about like where I'm at. Most people just want to know where they're at. And then they can feel like it's a little easier to bear the burden. And this is probably one of my favorite parts here. For whatever reason, along my life's journey, simply asking myself this one question, what is this teaching me, has been an incredible hack. I remember the first time I did it, asking it, I felt myself transcend the current moment, drop myself into the future, and then look back on my current position. One, it made me realize I'm going to get out of this moment. This is temporary. I didn't know the end date, but I knew it was temporary. And then I could see it from a new lens. Well, what are the things that I'm going to need in the future that I have to go through this growth moment? I have to confront some of these things. Why would I do this? I'll use a fitness example. If I am not in shape enough and I decide right now I can't climb 10 stairs, I sure as heck shouldn't be climbing a mountain. I need to prepare myself differently. Yes, I'm not ready. That's okay. So reflecting on the lessons when you're in the discomfort is what's preparing you for the future. Because now, I wish I did it in the beginning, but documenting your journey as you're going through it is so powerful because you're taking note of the lessons and you're processing the information in real time. That's why journaling is such a beautiful tool. You're learning about yourself in real time. You're processing the information, whether it's every night or every morning, getting scope on what's happening with you. It's one of the reasons why I've loved writing more over the past few years, getting the thoughts out of my head or presenting in this way, because it forces me to consolidate the thoughts and they refine even more over time. Here was a fun quote. Of course, I ran into like today or yesterday. It's a Bruce Lee quote. Pain will leave once it is done teaching you. Pain is a powerful teacher because it forces you to grow through it. You will have to learn how to accommodate for that resistance. And then it'll be gone when you're done. So if you can see that discomfort as the lesson right then, and you can look for the lesson in the moment, I've learned the pain goes away real fast. And that's relative. So, but relative to the timeline I thought, there's a burden that's lifted from the shoulders. There's a burden that's lifted from your mind, and you can accept and fall into the acceptance a little bit faster. And then that acceptance, you can move into the next stage. It's a beautiful thing. And ultimately, that's a grieving process that we're going through in life. I've come to learn grieving is one of the growth is in the grief. Hey, Ty, come here, bud. Come here. He's grieving. He's grieving because he just wants attention. He just wants attention, and now he's in. Maybe people can see him on the little screen. So let's go to the next thing. Let's recap. We almost made it to the end without him being too much of a crazy boy. Recapping for today's takeaways. We covered the phases of transformation again. Whenever I feel lost, I come back to it. Where am I at? What do I need to do? When I feel stuck, I go right back. I developed this thing, namely to solve my own problem. And I go through it. When I'm not feeling happy, and happiness to me is more about fulfillment, feeling aligned with my current actions, my behaviors, my identity, and going towards my purpose. When I feel that line up, man, I feel great. When I feel I'm at a standstill, I got to reassess. So remember, happiness starts at home. When you feel lost, you're right back through it. Honesty, organization, maturation. Assess yourself, organize your schedule and your priorities, and then do the habits, do the work and apply your energy in the appropriate places. And then do it over again. Endurance. Strengthen the endurance of your system. What growth looks like. This is a great reminder here. It's not linear. It is cyclical. You're going to come back to the same things. Accept that. The sooner you accept that you will confront the same thing again, you will realize that everybody says that growth is a process. It is. It will be the process of how quickly you come back through the cycle, or you can learn how to enjoy going through these cycles in a new way. Ooh, growth opportunity, not, this is happening again. That is a fun sign of your own personal growth. And the other part here, when you're really feeling it, when the numbers aren't going a certain way, when you're relying on belief and nobody else understands you, that's when stuff's not visible. The growth is being able to sit in the discomfort of not knowing how it works out. That's when you develop the patience. That's when you start to sit with the inner voices. That's when you confront your mindset and the issues and what your attachments are. Those things are so important to address. It's Jungian stuff with the shadow work, the other darkness that lies in there. The more you come to peace with those things, you become more whole. It's not light or dark. It's both things. You're capable of both sides. But when you can bring those things to light, you know how to use those tools in a aligned fashion. You can be in control of your emotions. You don't just let other voices that is somebody else's voice govern your actions. You can come back to truth and who you are and behave in a way that is according to what the best version of you wants to show up. So remember, it might not be showing up on the scale or in your bank account or some, I don't know, dating the Barbie girlfriend, whatever the thing is. Like it might not be showing up right then and there. It might be in your ability to learn to love yourself and be one with yourself and sit with yourself. That is growth. It just looks different. in that it's you sitting there. The keys to success: take these notes for yourself, make space to reflect. If you do not, which most people do not, that's why people resist meditating. There's a very vague term for most people. It's wildly misunderstood. At its most basic form, it's sitting and becoming aware. Excuse me. It's becoming mindful of your current self and your current state of affairs and being present in the moment. Carve out time deliberately to do just that. The busier you are, and people who say, I'm busy, guess what? I'm talking to you. You're the person who needs even more. Because I promise you there's a brick wall that you're about to run into and you can't even see it. And the universe, we have a little fun saying, the universe doesn't give 2 weeks notice. It's gonna come hit you whether you like it or not. And it's not fair. It is what it is. So when you start to feel these signs and symptoms come on and you're starting to say busy all the time, or you don't have the bandwidth, or whatever, you start blaming other factors on why you're not happy, that's the sign. It's time to sit with yourself so you can take accountability. Get some support systems in place and prioritize. So I'd probably switch those two. First, start to organize your life, organize your schedule, and prioritize what means the most. We talked about that aesthetics element. Remove the extra, the distractions, the things that are sapping your energy and taking you away from your purpose, the things that do not fill you up, the things that are just numbing you out from life. That could be food and alcohol. That could be relationships that are not supporting you, that are not supporting you the direction where you want to go, or not aligned with your values. And it could be media. It could be TV, stuff that just leaves you feeling drained. Great, it made you numb out for an hour or so, but it didn't move you closer to where you want to go. Prioritize the things that do move the needle. Get rid of the rest. Plug it into your calendar. Organize your life. Clean your room. That idea. And then, as we said, put your support systems in place. Do you need mentors? Do you need to have your friends group? How's things at home? 99% of the stuff I do with people is talk about, hey, how's things at home? And there's the happiness at home element. How's things with your marriage? Your meaningful relationship there? Your partner, your spouse, whatever title you give it. Often they're the person you are the most intimate with, meaning you're the most honest with them, meaning that they also become the most obvious reflection of if things are going right or wrong globally. That's an interesting weight for that person to bear. So you need to respect that. If things are off kilter, and you don't feel as connected as you want to be, and you don't feel like you're as present as you want to be, go check in there. Develop that support system. I tell this to my wife all the time. Anytime that I'm not making as much money as I want, I'm not making as much progress in my health as I want, I go, oh, I need to go check in with her. How's things going? We have one clear conversation. All of a sudden, it's like the seas parted. We're back on track with the actions that are moving the needle again. Get those things locked in. Maybe you need to join a group, a team, get a coach, whatever the thing, whether it's me or somebody else. Find the things that align with you, that are going to hold you accountable. Because I have to remind people of this. Most people just want to feel good, but that's the numbing out piece when it gone to too far. A quote unquote toxic dosage. I don't like the word toxic because people use it belligerently. A toxic dose is too much. So most people are looking for the acceptance. Everybody just accepts me for who I am. That's great. Yes, you should be loved for who you are, the true you, the authentic you. At the same token, people who really love you will also hold you accountable to your true greatness and what you actually aspire to do. That one's the sharper side of it. They're going to hold up the mirror and say, love you, got to do the thing. It's not hate, it is love. And just saying you're capable of holding your own standard. You can live up to your own standards. That's difficult. So get yourself around people that will be honest with you on both ends of the thing, and also remind you when you're being too hard on yourself, getting too locked in, too rigid, to say, take a breath, let's zoom out, get perspective, and let's recalibrate this together. They're the people that will help you do both. So do those things. With that said, if you do want support and you've been looking for that kind of holistic element, and we've talked about all the big elements here, and we talked also ultimately about spiritual fitness today. If you've been following along, you know that this is the big thing we're focusing now, the bigger direction with all this. We have the Empowered Leader Project. This is our flagship program. It's designed to help impact-driven entrepreneurs and business leaders overcome burnout. This is more that spiritual, existential burnout we were alluding to before, through holistic lifestyle transformation. It must address your health, your relationships, and your work. Through this, you're going to develop your spiritual fitness. What this means is it's going to connect you to your purpose. If you're feeling like I feel like I'm meant for something more, I want to have more impact. That's what we're talking about. We're going to get you closer to that. You're going to create more inner peace and fulfillment in your life. Another way of saying is like you're going to feel more grounded in who you are and feel more at ease and more connected to the world around you, whether it's your relationships, your work, or just even your body, feeling better within yourself. You're going to feel more enjoyment. And the other side of this, which is really important because we like to say here, celebrate when bad things don't happen. You become more resilient against life's challenges because your support systems can absorb more of the stress. So when chaos happens, because life happens, call it a death in the family, call it a health scare, call it a economic downturn, call it losing a staff member, whatever, those things are going to happen. Your system will be able to absorb that. So it doesn't knock you completely off track. You can hold the line when you're going through the stuff. And that makes you resilient, and it makes you make more steps forward every day towards the things you truly care about without losing out on all the things that you love, being connected to your family, feeling good in your body, and doing the work that you love. Doing the things you love with the people you love sounds pretty awesome. So if you do want to get in on that, you can go to nakedsundaystudios.com, schedule a free discovery call with yours truly. We'll have a little chat, talk about your goals, talk about where you're going, what you've struggled with. Ultimately, this is an opportunity for the two of us to get to know each other a little bit better. We need to know where we're at, because this is we want to have a meaningful relationship. And my goal is to allow you the ability to be as authentic as possible. A lot of people struggle being whatever that means, authentic, their true self. I, in many ways, get to be your trial run. What does it feel like? I don't care. I want you to be happy. That's all that matters to me. And I want you to go after the things you love. That gives me joy. We got to find out if we're the right fit, if our values align, if we're the right fit to go together on this journey. So if that's something that you're interested in, again, go to nakedsundaystudios.com to schedule your free discovery call for the Empowered Leader Project. With all that said, stop sharing. Thank you for sharing again the journey here, guys. This has been, the more I dive deeper into this stuff, the conversations that continue to come out of this, I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am for what people are willing to share, how much people open up. And I hope, if nothing else, you start to give yourself permission to lean into this. We're at a time in history where we have so much abundance, and so many people are afraid to still go after what they really care about. It's okay. If you needed somebody to give you permission, I'm the guy. You can practice that. The only permission you need is your own to be yourself. But if you need to practice, sometimes people got to have a dry run. So thank you for sharing this journey thus far. Thank you for sharing your time and your energy with me today. And from Ty, I'll bring him into it because, of course, he wants to say a little bye-bye statement. Until next time, love every body.